What's up guys, welcome to the 25th Xamarin Android tutorial, and in this video guys what we're going to be looking at is the card view. Okay, so the card view is something that's rather new and it's really just cool looking. It's basically a frame layout that lets you just pack whatever into it. Okay, so the last couple tutorials we've been doing is looking at the recycler view. Okay, and the recycler view allows us to use the card view efficiently. Okay, so remember the recycler view does a great job at reusing and recycling our views. And the card view, this becomes very imperative because the card view takes up a lot of rendering power. So because of all the views that it might naturally have in it, the rounded edges, the shadowing, so all that takes up a lot of rendering power, and it becomes very ideal to use the recycler view so that it can reuse and recycle them appropriately. Okay. So if you're not too familiar with a card view, a great app to check out is like the Google Plus app that uses the card views heavily. Okay, and you'll be able to get a good feel of what they are. Okay, or you could just take a look at the project sample that we have here. That this is the project that we will be completing once we're done. Okay, so first notice the first card and notice that there's just a whole bunch of views inside of it, and the corners are rounded, and it has that card look to it. Okay, the overlaying of the parent view. Okay, so just a really cool effect that it gives off. Now when we hit this, another card comes up. Okay, and notice that first the animation that it will use when to come up, and we'll go over that as well. Next, notice that obviously it's a different view. Okay, so the recycler view adapter lets us easily implement multiple views, and that's another thing that we'll be going over. Now that we have few more views, notice that as we scroll through, if it hasn't yet appeared before, it'll animate in. Okay, and right now this is the one that Google Plus is using, like a similar slide up kind of animation, and we'll use that, and I will try to go over a couple of the different ones, that way you get more comfortable with doing the animations, and then you could just play around with like the settings and the attributes and the properties. That way you can really make it your own and have the card views come out in just a whole bunch of different crazy ways. You can really just go wild with it. All right, so that's where we're going to be working on, guys, in this tutorial. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a quick look at the card view. All right, guys, so just to give you a more formal example of a card view, here we are. So a card view looks something like this. Okay, so here's something that's in the Google documentation, and as you can see, there are cards with just a custom view inside of it with an image view and some text. All right, so this is very common to see in a card view. Okay, and what a card view is essentially just a frame layout, like I said before, with rounded corners. The actual card view class actually extends or inherits from the frame layout. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's basically just a frame layout. And like I said, it's great to use with the recycler view, and that's because the recycler view is great with doing recycling and reusing of views, which is very necessary when it comes to the card views. It's made popular by the Google Now and Google Plus apps. Okay, so the Google Now app is what's uses the card views heavily, and the Google Plus app now uses the card views heavily as well. And if you're not too familiar with this, just check these out, and you'll see what I mean by using the card views heavily. And one of the other great things about the card view is that it allows you to customize it very easily and very flexibly. Okay, so they're highly customizable, and you literally just throw anything inside of them, and they'll grow, they'll expand in size and width and height, whatever you throw in it. Okay, so they can be different views and different sizes and everything like that. So they are very flexible when it comes to that. All right, guys. So now what we can go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and we want to change this row out. Okay, so right now in our base project, the one that you download, it's just a recycler view. If you run it, it's just a recycler view with this kind of row. Okay, pretty plain, pretty bland. All right, so what we first want to do is we want to first change this to our card view. Okay, so the row is going to represent a card view. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste over the source code. And the code, of course, is going to be inside of the done zip file, okay, below. So if you go ahead and download that, it will have this row.axml file inside of it. Okay. So I'm not gonna go over too much with the design, since it's just a whole bunch of linear layouts and text views and just some basic properties that we probably are all familiar with. Okay. The one I will go over, of course, is the card view. Okay. And that's the one that's gonna basically make all the magic happen. And notice that it is the parent inside of the entire row. Okay. So now if we come over here to the designer, notice that we have no representation of what it looks like. The designer just doesn't render it. And that's basically that's for all special or even our custom views. Okay. So that could be pretty frustrating when you're designing a new view and everything inside of it. You basically can't flip over to the designer and see how it's gonna look. So a way around that I usually like to practice is I just make a test or whatever kind of a bogus AXML file. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I still have this on my clipboard. So I'll go ahead and I'll paste the code that I can't see right now, right? And this is in my test. And what I'll do is I'll change it to something that is inside of that is a built-in view, okay, which is a frame layout in this case. So what I'll do is I'll replace the card view with the frame layout. Then anything associated with that card view I'll take off as well. Okay, like this is the namespace, card view namespace, and then I'll take this off. And then now I can come over to designer and I can see how it's gonna look, and that's because there's no card view. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll code everything, and I'll add a button, or I'll add this, or take this off, and I'll get everything the way I like it and the way it looks. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll just, okay, I like the way it looks, and I'll go ahead and I'll copy and paste it back over to this guy, and then I'll add the special view inside after. Okay, the card view, the parent. All right, that way once I come over here I can't see how it looks, but I know how it's going to look because it's rendered over here. Okay, so that's just a little workaround that I like to do. But if you're really good with the XML, then you pretty much don't need it. You know, you can just kind of see it all in your mind. But for long stuff like that, it is nice to have the designer and see how everything lays out. Okay, so that's just a little trick that I like to show you, that I would like to share with you guys. All right, so now that we have our first row, or our first card, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to make our second one, which is the one with the Android, the lollipop, and the image view. Okay, so what we can do is make another AXML file, row 2, just to keep the naming convention. All right, and once again, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste the AXML file from the done project. Okay, and all this is another card view with the same attributes, and with an image view that's just inside of it that wraps the content and matches the width of the parent. Okay, and that's all that is. All right, so and that's also actually all these images are actually already fixed and hard-coded to the icons in here. Okay, so nothing's happening dynamically, it's just fixed, but these will be a part of the start project as well. Okay, all right, so now that we have our two cards, guys, what we can do is we want to come into main activity. Okay, we want to override a method inside of our adapter class. Okay, so just if you guys were following along in the previous tutorial, what I did was I went ahead and I trimmed some of this. I took off the the custom list that we made in the previous tutorial. I took that off, and I also, if it was, remember, it was adding stuff on the head, on the top of the list, where now it's actually adding stuff on the bottom of the list. Okay, so we don't have that flipped inversion anymore. We just have a position as a position, and we don't have like the index position. We don't have to do any of that weird stuff that we would want to do if we added items to the actual head of the recycler view. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you probably didn't watch the previous tutorials. No problem, just go with the code. But I just wanted to throw that out there for the guys that watched the previous tutorial, that we're actually adding items to the bottom of the list now. Okay, so I took rid of that code, and now anything we have in here is just stuff that we need. I didn't want to have any bulk code that we weren't going to use, and it just wouldn't be wouldn't be ideal to have all that code for just to have and not use it. Okay, so it would kind of just fatten up the project for no reason. All right, so now what we do want to do is we want to go ahead and we want to override a method. Okay, and the method that we want to override is called GetItemViewType. All right, and now what this method does is really helpful. Okay, so whatever views that we have, it will return the proper view based on the position. All right, so we only have 2 views, all right, and 2 cards. So what we're going to do is we're just going to alternate between the 2, okay? And an easy way to do that is just to use modulus. And we'll basically just check for 0, so then it's even. So there's an even number row. Otherwise, will be an odd number. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to actually just return the row layout, okay? And remember, the layout is all that is just a unique integer ID, okay? So since we're returning an integer, it expects one, this is going to work out perfectly, okay? So if it's an even row, we'll return the first layout. Otherwise, we'll return the second. All right. And now what this thing does is this gets called automatically by the adapter, right? And it says, okay, we're in position 0. All right. So that's this one right here, right? So we're going to return the first layout. All right. So now it has this resource layout ID, which could be really anything. Say it's 7, the number 7. Okay. So then it's going to come over to here, and it's going to want to create the actual view. All right. And it's going to pass the view type 7. It's going to pass 7 inside of the view type variable. Okay, so then now we can check, say if it is 7, or we can now check against that and see, okay, is it the first layout or is it the second layout? Okay, and if it is whatever one it is, we can handle that accordingly. All right, so let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, so come over here. And we're going to want to check to see if view type equals the first row. And if it does, put first card view. If it does, then we want to do all of this code inside of here, okay? Since that's what we were doing already, all right? Otherwise, it's the second card view. Second card view. And then now in this case, what we want to do is we want to now inflate the second card view. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. We'll do the layout inflator. We'll get it from the context of the parent. Oop. And then with that, we will inflate it with the second card view. Attach it to the parent, but not its attributes. We won't inherit from that. All right, so now that we have the proper row, we need to make a view holder, okay? So if you remember, guys, the view holder is just a my view, okay? So we inherit from the view holder class. And what this does, remember, is it holds all of the views, the text view or anything we have, and then later on we use that holder to go ahead and bind anything that the text views text or anything that we need to bind to, okay? Based on the position, we grab the data and we bind it, okay? So we do that for each view, okay? So this view holder will hold one view, okay? So since now we have 2 views, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and make a second view holder, all right? And we'll just call it my view 2. All right, and this one doesn't have any text views. All it has is an image view, which we hard set in this case. So if you guys do want to have something that dynamically sets the image view, then of course you'll want to have like an image view type, and then from there, then you'll actually set the image in the bind method, okay? But right now we don't have any of that. We just have a view, which is going to be the row. So this is going to be the actual main view, is going to be the entire view, okay? So that's what that's going to represent, oops, right there. And then that's all we need. That's all we need is just a holder to hold our row and anything inside of it, which this one has 3, this one has none. All right, so now we have that. We can come down here and we can create an instance of it. And we'll pass in the entire row and we'll return the view. Okay, so now that we have that, now we can check to see, okay, if it's, say that, well, going back to the example we had, if it's, you know, the ID of this is 7, then it's going to come over here, this will be 7, and then this will check against, this will be 7, of course, because that's the ID of it. It'll say, oh, it's the first view. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to return the view, and that's all. Now it comes in, this position is now 1. It's going to come into here, say this is unique ID of 8. This is going to be 8. 8 is not equal to 7. Otherwise, okay, then it must be this view. And of course, if we had more views, then we'll do more else ifs. But since we only have 2, we can just do an else here. Okay? All right, so now that we have that, the last thing we need to do is we need to bind to it. Okay? So once again, what we can do is we can just simply check to see the position of the view. Okay? So since we're checking to see if the position over here is 0 or 1, we can check to see what it is right here and do it accordingly. But if we have multiple views, which you don't, but if we have like, well, we have 2, but if we have like 5, 6, 7, 8 thousand views, it might get a little weird, and it might just get a little more cumbersome. So what we could do is we can actually just see, okay, well, each view holder, right, holds a view. So we can have, like, you know, CardView 1, CardView 2. I just have something called the generic called MyView2, MyView1, or MyView. But basically each view that we create has to have a holder. Okay. So what we can do down here is we can actually check to see the type of the holder and then do that accordingly. Okay. So what we could do is we can do, the first thing we can do is we can do if holder is my view. So that means it's the first one, right? Because my view holds the first card view. Because of this, we actually instantiate my view and pass it the first card if it's the first row. Otherwise, it's my view 2, which is the second card view, right? So if holder is of type my view, so if it's of type that, if that instance is of that type, then we will go ahead and we will execute all this code as we originally did. All right. Otherwise, once again, because we only have 2 views, we will do something else accordingly. Okay, so we'll do first view and second view. All right. So now here we can do, like, you know, something like my view 2. We can cast it just like we did because we know that it's a my view 2, so then it's safe to cast as my view 2. All right, and then anything here we can do, like, we don't have any properties inside of here, but if we did, like the image view, we can actually set the bitmap or set anything accordingly. Okay, so right now we're just going to leave it here for now. All right, and we're going to come and we're going to over here, we're going to actually run the code and see if we get any errors, which looks like we did. All right, so we have an error inside of the row. Okay. So the error is just because we don't have any, we have a card view, but we don't actually have the library, okay? We're not actually referencing it. Remember that just like the recycler view, the card view becomes inside of the support library that we have not yet downloaded, okay? So in order to do that, what we can do is we need to go into our tools and open up the package manager console. All right. And what we want to type in is we want to install package xamarin.android.support.version7.cardview. And that should go ahead and install our card view. All right, I know it says that I have it installed, which I've already installed it before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to uninstall it. And reinstall it just so that you guys can see. Alright, so that's what should happen. It should just install, and any sort of prerequisites it should install as well. Now if we look over here inside of our references tab, we can see that we have our card view, okay? So now this should build successfully now that it should recognize the card view in the namespace and all that, okay? So it has. Let's go ahead and build it. Okay. And what we should expect to see is the two different views for the recycler view, okay? All right, looking good, looking good. Okay, so now notice that we have our cards, all right? And now we have our two views, okay? So we have both our cards and we have our views, but the only thing we don't have now is our animation, okay? So notice that it just appears, it doesn't just fly in with the animation that you saw before, okay? So now that we have this, we want to go ahead and we want to add our animations, all right? So let's go ahead and do that now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder inside of the resources folder just to hold my animations. And I'm going to create a new XML file called SlideUp, okay? All right, so now inside of SlideUp, we're going to actually specify the animation that should happen, okay? And once again, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste it over just to save some time, but I will explain. All that we're doing here now, guys, is we're just doing two different kind of animations, okay? So we're doing a translate and an alpha, okay? The alpha is just going to have it nicely fade in from invisible to visible, and the duration is going to be 500 milliseconds, so half a second. And then translate is going to give it mostly the effect, okay? And what it's doing is it's coming from 50% of the Y to 0, which is the finished, okay? So we can go ahead and mess around with these values and just see what a value that you like. But these are just some starting values and attributes that you guys can use to set it up, okay? So now that we have our slide up, let's go ahead and rebuild it. So the project should be able to catch it inside the IntelliSense when we come over back to the code. All right, so now that we have our slide up animation, we should now be able to come down to here, okay? And what we want to do now in here is we want to make let's go ahead and make a method, okay, that's going to animate. All right, so it's going to take a view, which is going to be the actual card view that it's going to animate. All right, and we're going to make an animation. So let's go ahead and resolve that by including it. Call it anim or whatever. And we're going to use the animation utilities, okay? And inside of it, we have a static method that returns an animation, all right? And we need a context, okay? So the context in the animation, and pretty much the easiest way to get the context right now, just to make it quick and dirty, what we could do is we just need to pass in the context through the main activity, okay? So inside the adapter, when we actually instantiate it, through the constructor, we can add this, okay? And once again, because this is a subclass of context, this will suffice just fine. So we'll come into here and we'll make a global variable inside of our adapter of type context. And then we'll add the third parameter now. And here we'll just initialize it. Okay, so now that we have our context, we can come down to our set animation class or method, I'm sorry, and we can give it the context, and it needs an ID, okay? So the ID is the unique identifier of the animation that we just created, okay? So that should be resource.animation.SlideUp, okay? So notice that it appears there. And the last thing that we need to do is we just need to do view, which is remember the view, the card view that is going to be animated. And we're going to just need to send it the animation that we just created from our animation, which picked it up from our XML file. Okay. So now that we have our set animation, what we can do is we can come into here when we actually bind it, and we can actually start the animation. Okay. So the easiest way to do that is what we want to do is first is we actually want to come up to our adapter class, and we want to set a global variable we'll call it current position, and we'll set it to -1 by default, okay? And all this guy is going to do is it's going to check to see if has this view already been animated, okay? So we'll do position, which is the position right here. So this is always going to be changing. The first time it's going to be 0, then 1, then 2, and so on, okay? So we'll check to see if it's greater than the current position, which the first time it always will be, because the current position, remember, we initialized to -1, and the position, the lowest it can be ever is 0, then 1, then 2, okay? So it'll come into here, it'll be 0. 0 is obviously greater than -1. So that way we know that it hasn't been animated yet. And what we can do is we can go ahead and animate it, and the way we do that is, remember that our my holder, that our main view is the actual row, okay? So this is the actual card view. And we'll send it that because that's what we want to animate. And then last, what we'll do is we'll set the current position to the position of the current position. So now this is 0, because this is 0, right? So the next time it comes in, if this position ever hits 0 again, it's going to be 0 is greater than 0, which isn't going to be true. Therefore, it's not going to animate again, okay? So it's only going to animate a card view once, all right? Which is the effect that we want. But once again, you guys can go ahead and play around with this and configure it to your liking. So here's where what happens when it's in the second card view, okay? So we want to basically just do the exact same thing. We just want to go ahead, and the main view is going to be the second card view, okay? It's going to be row 2. And we want to animate it. And then, of course, we just want to update the position so that it doesn't keep animating again, okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and run this, and let's make sure that it is animating the way that we expect it to. So now what we should see, guys, is we should see now like a animation effect of a fly-in effect every time the view binds. And if it hasn't bounded and it hasn't been displayed yet, it should animate up, okay? All right. Let's add a few just to make sure. So you see, once it gets to that point, about right here, it'll animate, okay? And playing around with those values inside of the actual XML file will change that, all right? So you can always change that around to your liking. There we have it, okay, guys? So the last thing I want to do is I just kind of want to fool around with the animations with you guys and just show you some really different cool stuff, okay? So I'll be quick about it, but there's nothing really anything new in the rest of this tutorial, but I do want to show you and explain a little bit of the different animations and just kind of get you guys pointed in the right direction of some animations that can happen when the binding happens with the cards, okay? So I want to make 2 more, and I'll call it slide right to left. Okay, so we'll have 2 of these, and once again, these are going to be inside of the done project. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these over, and the left to right. And all these are doing is coming from the very left, okay, all the way from off the screen, the -100, and going to the correct position of 0. And this one's just doing the opposite. It's coming from 0 all the way to the 100% of the screen. Okay, so the way we can now implement that is we want to have it slide left and right depending on where it's coming from. So we can come into here and we can simply just send it the position, okay? So with that, we can send, okay, so if it's this view, if it's this view, we want to slide left. If it's this view, we want to slide right when it's coming in, okay? So then all we need to do now is before we actually send it the animation, we can actually create it right here, okay? So we'll do int anim equals resource dot animation dot slide, and we'll do the right to left. Okay, and the only reason why it's not shown up here, guys, is because we haven't rebuilt it, and the IntelliSense hasn't picked that up yet. Okay, so if you do want to see that, just go ahead and rebuild the project, and it should pick that up. All right, and we'll do the same thing here, except this one's going to do the animation of slide left to right. Okay, now the last thing we need to do is we need to send it the actual animation to do. Okay. So we'll do that. And then in here, we're going to add the actual parameter, of course. And just to keep things uniform, we'll go ahead and change that. I'm going to go ahead and change that to current anim. And then now we want to replace this with the current animation that it should animate. Okay? So let's go ahead and run this and make sure that it's running the way we expect it to. All right, so now if you look, it came in from the left. This will come in from the right, left. Let's just make a few. All right, so now we just get some cool effects of it coming in, you know? And once again, you guys can play around with these values and make something that you really like. All right, there we have that. Okay, so the last thing that I want to show you guys is the flip. All right, so the flip one's my personal favorite, and what we're going to do is we're going to make another XML file called flip. All right, and with that, we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste that over. So now what this one's doing, guys, is notice it's doing an object animator. Okay, and with that, we can do the rotation about the x-axis. Okay, so it's gonna flip in about the x-axis. It's gonna flip around around the x-axis. Okay, and it's gonna come from the -90. So it's gonna be kind of turned on its back, and then it's gonna flip forward into the correct position. Okay, and once again, the duration is 500. We can change that around, and you guys can do so much of cool stuff with this. But here's another just kind of cool thing that you guys can do and play around with it, right? So let me show you that. Now with this, it's a little different because we're using the object animator, okay? So let me go ahead and point that out, how to correctly implement that one. All right, so what we want to do is we want to create an instance of an animator, which we can import here, call it animator. And what we want to do is we want to use an animator inflator, okay? And with that, it has a static method that we can load the animation of, which takes the context and again just takes the animation flip. Okay, let's go ahead and take that out. And the next thing we want to do is we want to actually set the view. Okay, so set target. All right, and what we're going to do there is we're actually going to set the target of it. Okay, so what's the target? What we want to animate is the view, of course. All right, and the last thing we want to do is we actually just want to start the animation. Okay, let's go ahead and run this now. So now what this one should give you a flip effect of it rolling about the x-axis. Okay, when it needs to bind. All right, let's add a few of them. So you get that cool animation of it coming in. and then you guys can have it, you know, go about the y-axis or the x-axis in different directions, but that's just another way to do it. So just wanted to show you guys that. But there you have it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this CardView tutorial, and now maybe you have a better grasp of CardViews and what they're all about. And they are really flexible. You can just really just throw anything in them. That's what I like about them. Just kind of, they are just a view entirely. So they're really good with being flexibility, and using with the recycler view becomes really ideal. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for watching.